Good morning, folks. It is October 30, 2020, and it is a Friday once again, if you can believe it. I'll be right back. All right, folks. Good morning to you. Happy Friday, and today we are going to be taking a look at the scientific revolution. We only have 6 people in here right now. Where is everybody? Oh, class starts at 9:16. Where is everyone? I'm not really sure where they're at. Do you have a costume, Mr. Knight? No, I'm ugly enough as it is without putting on masks. Do you have any plans for the weekend? Let's see. Do I have any plans for the weekend? Not really. No. I will be grading tests will be one of the things. I have to teach a class tomorrow morning from 8 until 11. I'll probably be doing some music, making some music. I'm in the process of making a live set for my music production career, I guess, if you want to call it that. And we are putting out a music video coming up on November 17th, so that should be pretty cool. I probably won't be here, to be honest with you. I will most likely be at my buddy's house making music. Hello there, good morning. So, all right, folks, let's get started talking about the Mandalorian Season 2. Nice. May have to watch some of that if I have time. I probably won't have time, though. All right, kids, we gotta talk about. Is there a link to this PowerPoint? Let's see here. I don't know if I put it in here yet or not. I don't think I did. Let me do that right now. We'll go here. We'll go here, and we'll do. Let's see. Let's go. Let's do. What's the name of this? Scientific Revolution. Open file location. And then we gotta bring this down and drop this here. Okay. All right. That should now be made available to you. Hello there to everybody. All right, so talking about the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment. The scientific revolution was, like many intellectual movements of the time, not something that happens overnight. All right, the scientific revolution takes time to develop. All right, a long time. And one of the reasons that the scientific revolution takes such a long time to develop is because it comes in direct opposition to the prevailing beliefs about the universe in its time. And in order to understand the significance of the scientific revolution, we have to understand that it was a break, a signal of change from the way that people thought about the world, the universe, and their connection to it all in a medieval time. So it's not, when we learn about the scientific revolution, it's not only understanding what the scientific revolution is, it's understanding how the scientific revolution was itself different from what people believed before it. It's not like discovering gold or something like that, and it's like, whoa, gold, we love gold. We didn't know it existed before, and now it exists, and we love it. That's not how it works. People already had explanations for the world, explanations for why things happened prior to the scientific revolution. When the scientific revolution comes about, they begin to take the same things that people already had an explanation that they were satisfied with about, and teach people why their explanations were wrong and why actually these scientific explanations of it were correct. That is going to take a long time. Why? Because people don't like being wrong. And when we think about ideas, particularly new ideas, okay? New ideas for things that we already had an explanation for. When you only have one person or a couple of people who are beginning to embrace a new idea about something, that means that the preponderance of people still cling on to that old idea. And because so many people are satisfied, are comfortable, embrace their old explanations of things, to get that number of people to set aside their beliefs about the world, to entertain new ideas about the world, is really, really, really difficult. Perhaps some of you have ever heard of the story of Plato's cave. If you've never heard of the story before, I don't blame you. It's something that perhaps you wouldn't be exposed to very early on in your education. But let me give you a brief rundown of the story, and I am paraphrasing here, of Plato's cave. Plato one time told the story about a fictional group of cave dwellers, a cave-dwelling society that had lived at the bottom of this deep, dark cavern for generation upon generation. And the cave dwellers only ever knew shadows, as the light from the entrance to the cave cast shadows upon the wall. So they spent their entire lives living at the depths of this deep, dark cave where the only light that they ever knew about was the light cast by the shadows along the walls of the cave. One day, one of these cave dwellers started to be curious about the source of the light. And for generations, the cave dwellers at the bottom of this cave had been told that to go and explore the light was dangerous. That to approach the upper segments of the cave where it would exit out was dangerous to the cave dwellers' society. Nevertheless, one very curious cave dweller one day decided to get closer and closer and closer to the entrance of the cave. And as they got closer, the light became brighter. And they got to the entrance of the cave and they peered out and they began looking outside and they started walking outside. And as they walked outside into this entire world that existed outside of the cave dwellers' knowledge and understanding, they began to experience new things, learn new things, come up with new understandings about where the light is actually coming from. They laid eyes on the sun for the first time. They have experiences that they then remember, record, and they then said, look at all of this amazing new knowledge that no one in the cave knows about. I can't wait to bring all of these new explanations back to my society to improve cave dweller society. They go back to the cave and they meet with the cave dwellers who say, where have you been? And they say, well, I went out and I saw this entirely new world. And I learned that the light it's coming from an entirely different source. It's coming from the sun. And these shadows are but a mere reflection of our own selves, and the light on the wall is actually coming from the sun. But instead of embracing this brave cave dweller who decided to go out and see what the world was like outside of the cave, instead of embracing this person, the cave dweller society murdered this person. The story of Plato's cave is very important as it pertains to our discussion of the scientific revolution, because as you begin to develop loftier and loftier scientific explanations and understandings of the world, what you essentially do is you exile yourself in a sense. Because now the responsibility lays within you to somehow take these new understandings that you know to be correct and somehow convince everybody else still stuck living at the bottom of the cave that they are the ones who are wrong. I'm going to pause right there. Any reactions to that? How do you convince the group of people who is already comfortable, warmly wrapped in the blanket of their own beliefs? How do you convince those people that their beliefs are wrong? Any thoughts? It sounds almost impossible. Well, it is. It sounds almost impossible. It would be very hard, yeah. I'll tell you how they go about doing it. All right? The situation reminds me of The Matrix. It should, Caitlin. It should, because that's exactly what it is. The Matrix is very much allegorically representative of Plato's cave, you know? And here's how we go about doing it, guys. I'll tell you how. Here's how you convince people they're wrong. Here's how you convince people they're wrong, all right? You show them evidence that they can't help but to accept. Evidence, all right? When you present people evidence of your findings, and they see it with their own eyes, any rational thinking person must be forced to abandon their previous view and embrace the new one. And guys, I need to go back to this idea about being wrong as being inherently human. It is in human nature to be wrong. You think I haven't been wrong before? You kidding me? I've been wrong so many times in my life. Okay? Some people will deny it anyway. Some people will deny it anyway. You're absolutely right. But those are the people who shouldn't be listened to, no matter what you show them. You're absolutely right. But that's not rational, and therefore their opinions don't matter. Okay? In a rational world, the only thing that matters is evidence. Okay? Good evidence. Not hand-selected evidence. Good evidence. Observable, replicatable evidence. Okay? That's the only thing that matters. And if people choose to deny that evidence, they have the right to do that. It's a free country. You can deny the evidence, but then your opinion is invalid. Okay? And should not be listened to. All right? You have the right to believe, say, think whatever you want. But that doesn't give you the right to make me think that that you're wrong. So yeah, I mean, it's Kat Carmona. Is that the real Catherine Carmona? What the heck? Kat, how are you? Holy smokes! Catherine, it's so good to see you in the YouTube chat here. For those of you that don't know Kat Carmona, she was a student in my class in, I believe, 2016. Holy cow, that's awesome! I'm so happy to see you in here. No wonder it gives you PTSD. All right, so moving forward, kids. I was watching a video from my college class. I saw this. This is way better, isn't it? (2016) Evelyn, you were alive in 2016. So, very good. All right, very good, folks. Well, let me move forward here. So, we have to understand that just having beliefs isn't good enough about things. Beliefs need to be substantiated by evidence, by facts, right? And so we need to understand what the world was like prior to the start of the scientific revolution. Remember that, guys, religion, okay, Christianity informed every single aspect of people's lives, from politics to anything that they understood about, anything that people experienced, anything to do with plagues, fires, natural disasters could be explained away through God, okay? Let's take something as simple as the sun rising in the east and setting in the west, all right? look at the evidence, the so-called evidence, commonsensical explanations that people had for how the relationship between Earth and the sun. All right? The relationship between the Earth and the sun was this. How do we go about observing that relationship? Ask yourself a simple question. Why does the sun rise in the east and set in the west? What's the explanation for that according to somebody in the medieval view? Okay? All right? Technically, we know that. Of course, we know that now. The Earth is both rotating and revolving around the sun. Okay? We know that now. But I want you to use a commonsensical explanation for it. Okay? The commonsensical explanation for the relationship between the Earth and the sun is this. If you're a person living in that time, common sense dictates, I don't feel the Earth move. I don't feel the Earth move by way of rotation. I also don't feel the Earth move by revolution around the sun. Okay? I see the sun move across the sky every single day. Okay? I see the sun moving across the sky every single day. I see the moon moving across the sky every single day. I see the stars moving across the night sky every single day. I'm not moving. I see what's moving. So, common sense, which is a terrible way of making sense of the world, by the way, common sense dictates that the Earth is stationary and that everything else in the sky is moving around us. And you could understand why somebody in that time would have come to that conclusion because it makes sense. Try being Copernicus, explaining to people your common sense is wrong, and actually what's happening is that the sun is stationary and we are not only moving around the sun, but this Earth itself is spinning and you just don't feel it. People's senses, which is the only way we interpret the world around us is through our senses, vision, hearing, touch, etc., okay, smell and so on. What the heck? How are you going to convince people to go against what their senses tell them about what's happening and embrace an entirely new radical idea that is seemingly not supported by what their senses tell them? And you find yourself in a very similar situation to the cave dweller who ventured out of the cave and went down back to the bottom of it and tried to convince them of the entire universe that exists outside of their cave. It's very, very hard. All right? Not to mention the role that religion played in all of this. And you have to understand that not only did people make sense of the world through their senses, they made sense of the world through the doctrine of their religion, which had for millennia by this point, 1,500 years, a millennia and a half, supported what people believed about the universe and how it worked through their religious text in the Bible. So now, very early on, you have to understand that guys like Copernicus didn't develop in a vacuum. Guys like Galileo didn't develop in a vacuum. They weren't immune from the role of the church in society and in politics and other things like that. They were hopelessly wrapped in it themselves. And it became very clear very early on in the scientific revolution in the midst of the Protestant Reformation, where not only do you have these new ideas emerging about science, you have new innovations and technologies in navigational tools, but also things like telescopes and microscopes and other things like that scientists are beginning to use to observe the world around them. Okay? You also have the religious pluralism that's going on in Europe at this time, where you have, a society that is completely embroiled in religious warfare pertaining to who is worshiping the true God. And very early on in the scientific revolution, you see the church, and when I say the church, I mean all denominations, whether Catholic or Protestant, who generally look at the scientific revolution as a challenge to the church's stranglehold grip on people's intellect, people's culture, the society and how it's structured, the politics of the society, which were negotiated by divine right, where God gave kings the power to rule, and so on and so forth. All of these thinkers during this time are of that same society, which means that they are walking a fine line between new discovery and challenging the church, which is the most dominant institution at that time. And the church has a vested interest in retaining its stranglehold grip on society and refuting new knowledge that challenges the teachings of the Bible. And when you have extraordinarily religious segments of the population who use not evidence, but belief and quote-unquote common sense to interpret the world around them, you live in a place where it is going to create a conflict between scientific knowledge and religious beliefs. All right? And this happens very early on in the scientific revolution, which explains to my point earlier why the scientific revolution is so slow to take hold in Europe, and typically really only takes hold amongst the most educated and wealthiest segments of the population. The vast majority of people living in Europe at this time are rural peasants. They're not going to observatories. They're not going to universities. They're not reading Latin texts. They're not doing those things. Okay? They are living in their tiny little towns and villages and so on, scattered across, or farms across Europe, having virtually no exposure to these new ideas. And religion remains powerful to these people. They don't want their worldviews challenged. They're comfortably wrapped in the blanket of their world beliefs being defined by the church. And I want to bring up another thing about the scientific revolution, guys. You have to understand that the way that people explained the universe was so superstitious, so devoted to these fantastical understandings that in our modern day world we dispose of very quickly. Take witchcraft as one of them for your extra credit assignment. I don't know if anyone's done that extra credit assignment yet, but take witchcraft. Today we know that things like demons, witches, vampires, werewolves, and blah, 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 all that stuff, it's purely nonsense, okay? And we have fun with it at Halloween. We dress up in costumes and we all have a grand old time. But at the end of the day, we know no one's casting magical spells, okay? People don't do that. It doesn't exist. There's not ability. There's no such thing as telepathy. There's no such thing as magic. There's no such thing as da-da-da-da-da-da. Okay? These things are not real. We understand that now. But there was a time where they were very real, and they were every bit as rational of an explanation for everyday phenomena as anything else was. Why do fires and plagues break out? God's punishing us for being too sinful. He's testing our faith. Okay? Things like that. And the more and more and more that we begin to attribute to science, the more we can explain things through known, predictable laws of nature, the less and less and less we can attribute to divinity. Okay? And this fundamentally challenges the Roman Catholic Church as well as all of the Protestant denominations. Okay? It is perceived virtually immediately as a threat to their power. Right? Nonetheless, these superstitious ideas go back a long time. If you've ever thrown a coin into a wishing well, you are actually extending a superstitious Roman practice that was practiced by the Roman empires and various members of the Roman legion when they would conquer new towns, particularly in the case of a town called Trier, which is now in modern-day Germany. The Roman Empire conquered the city of Trier in the, I'm going to say it was probably around the turn of the millennia, probably around the 100s or somewhere in that area, maybe a little later. When the Romans conquered Trier, the Romans, being superstitious, super superstitious, they felt that the destruction of the city of Trier upset the gods. From the point at which Trier was conquered, Romans began throwing coins into the river that ran through Trier as paying homage to the gods for upsetting the city of Trier when they destroyed it. People still think the earth is flat now, even now, so how would you be able to convince them they are wrong? People who still think that the earth is flat now, we need to understand, guys, about this whole thing. Going back to what I said earlier, I'm inclined to believe that flat earthers are the biggest trolls of society. I don't think that even the most ardent of flat earthers actually think that the earth is flat. I think it is a way of stoking the already existing fake news phenomena, blah, 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 that's been going on for the last 10 years or so. Okay? The flat earthers were exploiting what seemingly is perhaps the most obvious explanation that we have of all of the universe, going back to even ancient Greece, that people understood that the earth was round. And being a proponent of the flat earth theory does not make the flat earth theory anywhere close to being true. And I'll say again, simply having an opinion about something says nothing about the validity of that opinion. People are entitled, by way of individual freedom, to hold whatever personal beliefs they have. If you want to, in my world, the way that I look at it is this. If you want to believe that the earth is flat, go ahead and do so. But don't expect me not to counter your ludicrous view of the world with one that is based in fact and evidence. Okay? Merely having an opinion is not enough. I do not value opinions. Okay? I do not value opinions purely on the basis of them being held by someone. That's irrational. Okay? What is rational is listening to other people's opinions, and then when you realize that their opinion is wrong, coming back at those opinions with factual evidence. What about destructive beliefs like anti-vax beliefs? Once again, in a rational society, we should listen to all sides of an argument. However, we should side. Arguments natively have two sides to them. That's the whole point of an argument. If we're taking the argument of vaccines versus anti-vaccines, we have to look at the evidence. And what you'll find about those kids who are not vaccinated is, based on the evidence, the kids who are sent to school and not vaccinated are far more prone to dying. And if you want to look up the stats of that, you just have to go to the CDC website, the World Health Organization website, and so on, and look at the statistics about kids that are vaccinated that die from diseases and kids that are not vaccinated that die from diseases. And there's plenty of evidence to demonstrate that vaccines work, right? And so in that scenario, what we have done is we have entertained the argument of anti-vaxxers. We've said, okay, so one theory is that vaccines don't work. We went and we looked for evidence. And we pulled that evidence from scientific, unbiased organizations with experts within that field. And we say, well, according to all the scientific studies that have been done in this in controlled experiments, we find that vaccines actually do work. Which means that in the face of this evidence, I must now, as a rational thinker, dispose of my previous view and embrace a new one, because that's what rational thinkers do. If you're not going to be a rational thinker, and you're going to cherry pick evidence, and you're going to outright deny evidence that has been presented to you that undermines your worldview, you are not a rational thinker, and thus your opinion is invalidated. And that's the conversation there. That's that. So I encourage you to embrace this philosophy on rational thinking, because people think that they make rational decisions all the time, when in fact they are making a decision based on emotion, based on impulse, based on fear, based on cultural influence, and those are not good things to be influenced by. Those are not rational decisions to make. So, skepticism is good. It's good to be skeptical. What's not good is to be so skeptical that you refuse evidence that undermines your skepticism. That's not skepticism. That's just stupidity. All right. Any comments on that? No comments. I shall move forward. I just wanted to make sure that in case anyone had any things that they wanted to mention about it, that I would be happy to continue discussing. Let's take a look at major causes. By the way, what time do we get done in here? 10? .56. Okay. I'm going to go for 7 more minutes, and I'm going to get as much of this covered as I can. Causes of the scientific... Why does the scientific revolution start in the first place? What caused people to begin questioning the world around them? Well, these medieval universities had been put into place going all the way back to... And remember, medieval universities were typically tied to the church, which meant that a lot of these medieval universities were very religious institutions. Nonetheless, within these religious medieval universities, by the 1300s, philosophy had become an accepted discipline within these universities, and philosophers within these universities, medieval philosophers, had a degree of independence from the theologians at the university. The theologians were doing religious studies, and the main idea that informed their ideas was known as scholasticism, which was a lot of ideas surrounding rhetorical arguments about the Bible and Scripture and so on and so forth. All right, major religious studies. But increasingly we see philosophers coming to study at these universities. And they had a degree of free inquiry, not completely free. Of course, they're still people of their time. They're still living in the 1300s in a predominantly Catholic Europe. But these leading universities, particularly in Italy, established new professorships of areas of philosophy. They used to take philosophy and divide it into various regions. Brian Liu, how the heck are you? Wow, how nice is it to see all these former students popping in and saying hello today. So sweet. Very nice of you guys. I really appreciate that. It's cool. I just got goosebumps from seeing just yet another student here coming back to poke their head in and say hello. That's just really wonderful. I love that. All right. So medieval philosophers developed a sense of independence, and they took philosophy and they divided it into different types of philosophy. So you could be a philosopher of mathematics. You could be a philosopher of astronomy. You could be a philosopher of physics. And even to this day, this medieval tradition of having a doctor of philosophy, in other words, a PhD, okay, is still how we measure people's educational attainment in various fields. So you can still, to this day, get a PhD in math, a PhD in astrophysics, a PhD in biology, a PhD in history, a PhD in philosophy. You could literally be a doctor of philosophy in philosophy, right? So these ideas go back all the way to the medieval universities. And major scientific figures either studied or taught at these universities. And while this was happening, we began to see the Renaissance take hold. So the Renaissance definitely contributed to the beginnings of the scientific revolution because of the rediscovery of ancient mathematics, that the Ottoman Turks were trading these ancient math techniques back to the Italians, where those math techniques had been long forgotten to history. Renaissance patronage was often as much scientific as it was artistic and humanistic. Remember that a lot of scientific patronage came in the form of map making. It came in the form of the development of new instruments like the sextant or the telescope or the compass or various other instruments like that. Remember that new navigational problems alongside the Renaissance and alongside the scientific revolution and the Protestant Reformation, another thing that's happening in the 1500s is that European nations have now discovered the New World. And one of the reasons, one of the ways in which you get people to begin to embrace these new ideas is to show them things right in front of their eyes that they cannot help but accept as truth. And one of those discoveries is the discovery of the New World, for which the Roman Catholic Church had absolutely no knowledge or explanation to its existence prior to the discovery of the New World for the Europeans by Columbus. Okay, so when we talk about Columbus, quote unquote, discovering the New World, he didn't discover it for humanity, but he certainly did discover it in the most significant way for Europeans. And when Europeans, with their faith, began to examine the fact that you had this entirely new set of continents in Central, North, and South America, all right, all of this new knowledge about the New World forced people to re-examine what they believed about the globe prior to its discovery. It is irrefutable to people when you say to them, well, what about the New World? They have to look at the New World and say, yeah, it exists because it's there. There's no, people who are flat earthers of their time basically saying, oh, it's just a liberal plot or something like that. People say, okay, yeah, it exists, all right? And this forces them to realize, like, well, this has existed probably this entire time and we didn't know about it. Maybe there are other things that we don't know about. It opens the door for people to say, maybe we don't have everything figured out. And really, the way that I want to close this is by characterizing the difference between modern thinkers and thinkers of the scientific revolution era. And the major difference is this. Prior to the start of the scientific revolution, believe it or not, and it's almost hard to wrap your head around because of how we view the world today, believe it or not, the belief of folks during the Renaissance and the medieval era was that essentially everything that there was to know, anything that you ever wanted to know about anything, could be found in two places. One, the Bible. Two, ancient knowledges. The belief of the connection between the discovery of knowledge and time is that in this era, people believed that all new knowledge was not really new, but simply a rediscovery of knowledge from the past. That everything that anyone ever wanted to learn was simply a reflection of what had already been discovered, learned, written down, recorded sometime in history, either by Catholic theologians or by ancient Greco-Roman philosophers. Okay? And that knowledge was simply to be uncovered from the past. Today, it's really hard to wrap our heads around that understanding of the connection between discovery and time, because the way that we look at it today is exactly the opposite. Today, we look at the way that we uncover knowledge as being connected not to the past, but to the future. In our modern scientific society, we understand that today there are things we do not know and have never had the answers for, but that one day in the future, a new discovery, a new technological advancement, a new scientific experiment will allow us to develop understandings some point in the future that will allow us to do things like cure cancer, okay? Or any number of other things that we, explain dark matter in the universe or something of that. We don't know about it yet. We don't understand it yet, but at one point in the future, we will. And that is one of the most fundamental differences that the scientific revolution instigates in this time, is that we start a very long tradition, a very long transition, okay, into this new tradition of understanding that knowledge is to be uncovered in the future, rather than focusing on this understanding that everything is already known and all we have to do is look at the past. Guys, you wouldn't look at an instruction manual from 3 years ago to how to fix a problem. You'd look at the most recent instruction manual. You would not be studying you wouldn't be looking at a forum that has a response to a problem that you're having from 2003. You'd be looking at a forum that has a response from 2020. We don't like knowledge that comes from the past anymore because we consider it archaic and outdated. Because we want the most recent knowledge to inform our understandings. I'll pick it up there next time. Have a wonderful Friday and a great weekend, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in.